Hey, I'm Brian and this is the Apple Watch Series 6. This will not be a full review, there are enough of those videos out there already. Instead it will be more of my experience with the Series 6 as my first ever Apple Watch, also coming from the Android side. And this will be more of a chill, talkative kind of video. You said that you really liked those when I made one with my iPhone 12 mini unboxing, so let's go. Okay, let's maybe start with the design of this watch. Of course, it's a square watch, and I normally don't really like square watches that much because I think this looks a lot more technical, if that's what you would like to say, than maybe a round watch, which there are a lot more of on the side of Android Wear, or Wear OS as it's called now. But I actually think that this does look pretty nice, which is also due to the fact that it's very well made and looks very premium. Especially the way how the glass melts into the aluminium frame. This is the aluminium version of the Apple Watch. And also with the ceramic backing. Most Wear OS watches have like plastic on the back and so on, so they don't really feel that premium, even though they might look more like a normal watch with their round face. Of course, still, I would really like if Apple would make a round version of this Apple Watch, because I could only imagine how nice that would look and feel if they brought over all of this nice design and machining over to a round, more traditionally shaped watch. The mechanism for the bands on this watch is actually pretty nice. I think it's pretty easy to swap bands and so on. But unfortunately, the bands from Apple are really expensive. This band, for example, this standard rubber strap costs like 50 euros or something. And of course, that's really expensive. I don't think that it's that big of a deal if you buy the strap with the watch, like in the first place, then it doesn't look like that much more. But if you buy replacement straps after the fact, then you really notice how expensive they are. And I also would have really liked it if there was an easy way to just use standard 22mm watch straps with this watch, because then you would have a lot more options also in terms of pricing. The build quality, as I already said, of this watch is really, really nice. It's very well made, even in this aluminium. I did choose the aluminium Apple Watch because I think that it doesn't really make sense to spend this much money on a product that will be obsolete in 1 or 2 years in terms of how fast it is and so on, because this is basically a smartphone on your wrist and you replace that every 2-3 years. So why would you invest that much money in a more expensive Apple Watch made from titanium or something if it gets old and slow just as fast as the normal aluminium Apple Watches? And despite that, I think the aluminium does still look very premium. This is also the LTE version of the Apple Watch. I think that's actually pretty nice. When you go running, for example, you can just take the Apple Watch with you without having to take your phone. And even if you forgot to download a podcast or something like that, you can just play it from the cloud on your Apple Watch. And of course, the tracking is also a lot more robust than with a standard GPS Apple Watch. You can also take calls. And what I really like is that you can get notifications from your iPhone, even if you leave your iPhone behind at home. I think that's really cool because that is not at all possible on the Wear OS side. You always need a Bluetooth connection to your phone in order to get notifications and reply to them. But here, this even works over the internet to your iPhone, which I think is really cool and basically the primary reason why I think LTE actually makes sense on the Apple Watch. Of course, it really does only make sense for you if you value only having to take your watch at certain times and being able to leave your phone behind. But I think that already brings us pretty well into functionality of the Apple Watch. Apple said in the presentation of the original Apple Watch that they didn't just scale down the iPhone interface to a watch because that wouldn't make sense. But I actually think that watchOS is a lot closer to iOS than Wear OS is, for example, to Android. Because Wear OS is really tailored to the watch experience with how it works and so on. But here you really have your notifications swiping down from the top and your control center from the bottom, and you have your app drawer with all of the apps and so on. So it does feel more like a smartphone operating system on your wrist than Wear OS does, I think, which is like more of a glorified notification center, if that makes sense. But what I actually have to say is that the performance of this watch is so much better than on Wear OS. It's not even comparable in any way. It's not even close. I mean, just simple things like typing in your PIN code when you put on the watch in the morning, because you need a PIN code, obviously, so the payment is protected on the watch. That goes instantly, is super smooth. On Wear OS, that always lags, and because of the lag, you have to type it in multiple times and so on. It's just pretty frustrating, and I had none of these frustrations with this watch. All of the apps launch super quick. It's really almost instant and feels basically as fast as the interface on an iPhone. despite the fact that this is like a super small device with a way less powerful chip. So I think that is actually a big part of what makes the experience on the Apple Watch so good and so much better, is that it's actually really fast and really smooth and doesn't have any stutters or anything like Wear OS does. And there are also no real bugs in the operating system where the watch doesn't connect to your phone anymore, you don't get notifications anymore, or if you go out running without your phone with only GPS and LTE disabled, then on Wear OS watches, what would happen is it usually just wouldn't find your GPS location because that wouldn't work. This never happens on here. Everything just works, it never loses connection to the phone, it always reconnects automatically. And I think that's really refreshing, that all of the stuff just works and that you don't have any of these weird things, or for example, mobile payments not working for some reason and so on. Also, the NFC chip in here for using Apple Pay is way better than in any of the Wear OS watches I've tried so far. You really only have to tap it about this far away from the payment terminal and it pays, it's done. Whereas with Wear OS watches, you have to really like try and it might not work even then. So that's really nice. I also think that some other super smart features, like for example hand wash detection, that it automatically detects when you're washing your hands because it hears the sound of the water and stuff and then can give you a timer. I think such things are just really super smart. What I don't like is that the watch face selection is really limited, like there's just not a lot of options. Some of the ones on here are really nice, and I also think the complications, I think is what they're called, they're also really nice and work really well, especially because they also work on the always on display, all of them. So you can really customize your watch face with a lot of information. But yeah, there just aren't that many options because there's no third-party watch faces allowed on the Apple Watch. I think that's a bit of a bummer. Speaking of the always on display, that is also something that really struck me on the Apple Watch, because on Wear OS, the always on displays are usually pretty dim. You can't really see them in bright sunlight, also because they take up a lot of battery. So that's why manufacturers really don't go ham with the brightness and so on always on displays. And of course they're black and white. On here, the always on display is color and it's super bright. Normally indoors, you can't really tell the difference between the normal display and the always on display in terms of brightness. It's actually, pretty nice. As you can see, this right now is the always on display, and I think, you can't really tell the difference to the normal display of the Apple Watch. And it doesn't really even take that much battery. I mean, the battery life on this watch has been amazing, basically. You can get about 2 days of battery life, no problem, even with the always on display enabled. I'm ending days with about 50% left, even when working out or something like that, and even when using LTE from time to time. So I think that's just pretty amazing, and it's also really consistent. I think that's something that's pretty important. Charging is not that fast, unfortunately, like 1.5 hours. Okay, that's better than the old Apple Watches, but it still isn't that fast. And I would really like if this watch charged with Qi and not only their proprietary puck that you put it on. That would be very nice. But I actually like this like nightstand feature where you can put it on sideways and then it's like a little alarm clock. The sleep tracking I didn't really use that much, mostly because I really can't sleep that well with the watch on my wrist, and it also doesn't give you that much information, at least in the native sleep tracking apps, so I don't really think that's that worth it. Exercise tracking is very robust because all of the other exercise tracking apps that you can also use, the third-party ones, they also tie into Apple's Health app, and I really like these rings that you can close and so on, where it actually gives you reminders that you might want to exercise some more or take a walk or something like that. I think that does actually help to stay a bit more healthy. I also think that the data that it collects is a lot more robust than Google Fit, but you can also trade data between the two, like one can send data to the other and vice versa. I think that's actually pretty nice. I didn't know that Apple made that open. In terms of the app selection, of course, there are really a lot of apps and most of them are really fast and offer some nice functionality, but I really don't use a lot of apps except for like Maps or my running app or Shazam or something like that. Yeah, I really only use this watch mostly for working out, for telling the time. That's why I really think that an always on display is this important, because the watch does recognize you flicking your wrist pretty well, but I'm also sometimes checking the time just without having to flick my wrist and just having it on the table, and I think that's very nice to have an always on display for. And apart from that, just notifications, stuff like that. I don't really use it for a lot of things apart from that. It's more of something that augments the phone experience. But yeah, also being able to just connect Bluetooth headphones to the watch, being able to listen to music on it without having my phone with me and stuff like that. And also the integration with the iPhone. When you have a notification pulled up on the Apple Watch and you take out your iPhone, then it automatically tells you, okay, do you want to open this app that you just looked at the notification for? I think stuff like that is actually really handy. Apart from that, I don't think there's that much more. What I do want to answer is the big question. I think what a lot of people always say is that the Apple Watch is so much better than all other Wear OS watches, all other smartwatches, that's the main big reason why people use iPhones. And I can understand the first part of this whole analysis. As I already said, this really is the best smartwatch by miles, and I don't think I really fully realized that until using one for a couple of weeks. I've been using this watch for about 3 weeks now. It does do a lot of cool stuff, and it definitely is the best smartwatch out there. There are some cool features, but it really isn't like a super must have over what exists on the Wear OS side, especially now with the new chips that are coming out for that. I think performance will be a bit better. You can basically do most of the stuff that you can do on here on those two. It's just a bit less enjoyable, and there are some more bugs and so on. But that wouldn't necessarily be something that would be such a big deal that I would stop going away from the iPhone back to the Android side. I will still keep using these two in conjunction with each other for a while to get a bit more of an experience in the Apple world, to also have that side of the medal, because I think it's very important to be both on the Android side and on the iOS side, to be able to tell the two apart, what is better about one, what is better about the other. I also wanted to talk about price real quick. And of course, especially the LTE version of this is very expensive at like 550 euros. But I think if you take into account that you can of course sell this on eBay or something after 2 years, I don't think it is like that big of a deal that's a bit more expensive than Wear OS watches. I think it is definitely worth the price in terms of value compared to those, because it really is a lot better. It's more well made than Wear OS watches and has a lot more functionality. But of course the SE is much less expensive than this, and I think for most people who don't need the always on display or something, that will also be pretty much all they would need, because for example the ECG feature or something like that, I didn't really use that on this watch, or the blood oxygen, just for testing purposes. But apart from that, that's not really something you need day to day, I think. One last thing, this happens when you don't have a script. The digital crown. I think this is actually like the best execution that I've seen of a scroll wheel on a watch, because the haptic feedback is really nice. I think the vibration motor on this watch is not as good as in the iPhone, maybe also because it's smaller probably or something. And it's not as good as I would have expected from all of the people saying, oh, it taps your wrist, it's such a nice experience with the vibration motor and so on. It is nice, it is a lot better than Wear OS, but it's not that special really. Okay, yeah, I think that's basically everything I have to say for my experience with the Apple Watch 6 so far. I hope you like this a little bit more talkative style of video. And with that, all that is left for me to say is, if you enjoyed this video, you know which buttons to press. Don't forget to press that follow button on Twitter, and don't forget your mask when you leave the house. I'm Brian, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.